Hi, and welcome to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. Today, we are going to talk about when an employee or a teammate comes and asks for your help. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. My name is Kale Houser. Thank you for joining me today. All right, I was thinking about something that happened to me as a young leader, and it was really probably my first official time being in a position of leadership, like officially, no kidding, sanctioned by the organization and all that kind of stuff. Like I was the boss of my own combat flight in the Air Force. And certainly there are differences, right? Because in a military setting, there is rank and there's structure and there's command authority and all those things that we've discussed. Hopefully you've heard some of those podcasts. But this was my first. While I wasn't in official like command, like I didn't have, punishment by the law type of authority, that was certainly reserved for the squadron commander, but he had delegated pieces of his authority to me as a flight commander, right? That's our smallest unit in the Air Force is the flight. So I was put in charge of my own flight. And I was given a lot of leeway because, I was a little bit older as an officer than my equivalent, coworkers that were of equivalent rank. I was just older because I came into the Air Force older and I had a different path than most of the college graduates that came right out of college into the Air Force. So there was a lot of assumption that, I kind of knew what I was doing and I could relate to people better and I kind of had a little bit more people skills and stuff, like just all those things of just being older, a little bit more experience, which was totally accurate because I did. I had a little more experience. I was able to relate to people a little bit better and things of that nature. So I don't know how much of that went into the thinking of my leadership as far as putting me in that position and letting me kind of do whatever I wanted, essentially, for that matter. So the point being, I was empowered a lot. I didn't feel like I had to ask for permission if I wanted to make a decision that affected my flight only. I didn't feel that I had to run things by or constantly be checking up with my leadership. It was more just kind of a status update, like, yep, everything's going great, or, this is going on, whatever the case may be. And it was great because it gave me an opportunity to kind of test a lot of these theories that I had developed as for leadership, for what would I do if I was ever put in this position to actually have the capability, the power, the authority to make these changes and implement these changes. And we've certainly talked about that a little bit, especially with the scheduling thing in the past. If you haven't, go back and listen to that episode about that. I think it's a pretty fascinating story and look into leadership in general. So there was another instance where, like I said, I felt very empowered. I felt that there weren't very many problems that I couldn't handle or didn't have the will of the commander, or the what's the word I'm looking for? Like the sanction of the commander, the approval. There it is. Wow, such an easy word. The approval of the commander to essentially handle. But I do remember one instance, and honestly, I don't remember what the problem was, but I remember one instance like, I don't know what to do here. I don't know how to handle this problem. And I don't remember if it was a scheduling thing or an operational thing or a personnel thing, handling, whatever. Maybe I had a shortfall or people out sick. And honestly, I do not remember, but I do remember specifically going, basically telling myself like, okay, being self-aware enough to not like bowl through the china shop like I'm just going to figure this out because I'm the smartest man in the world, right? And have that ego is more like, okay, I have hit the limits of my capability, my experience, and my understanding of this situation and this problem. I need help. And this is so awesome. I have people that are here to help me, that their job is to run this squadron, and I'm part of this squadron, and they're interested in the success of this squadron. I'm having a problem with that. And hey, they would love to help me. And I had, at this point, I would argue 1, 2, 3 people above me within my squadron, right? So I had our ADOs, which is an assistant operations officer. So they kind of help run operations. And that was your kind of mid-level managers. And I was a captain at this time. Mid-level officer or lower mid-level officer. So you had your ADOs kind of as my front line. While they weren't my supervisors or anything like that, they were that mid-level in charge of operations. And I seem to remember it was probably something to do with some sort of operational thing, because my first inclination was to go to one of the ADOs who was senior to me, right? They're older just by nature of being higher in rank. They have more experience. They've been around this platform more than me. And maybe not necessarily that platform, but certainly in the Air Force and things of that nature. And then, of course, above them is the actual operations officer, which in a flying squadron is kind of like the assistant commander or the vice commander, right? Because in a flying squadron, you have the commander, and they're not generally big enough to warrant a second in command, a vice commander, but they do have an operations officer. So while the commander, him or herself deals with the overall health of the squadron at large, whether it be the flying, the personnel, whatever, the budget, all those things, the operations officer focuses more on the operation sides and making sure the mission gets done, not so much on, making sure the supply department has all the supplies we need, enough headsets for everyone, so that, or if one gets broke, it's ordered, right? So they're not so much concerned about that, but they are kind of in general a fallback second in command in our squadron. So I had three levels above me before I hit the squadron commander. And in most units in the military, the squadron commander doesn't encourage going straight to them with problems, okay? Even though that squadron commander, as the flight commander, he was my direct supervisor. He was who I reported to, like, officially, right? It was on all my paperwork, like, hey, who's your supervisor? Oh, it's Lieutenant Colonel so-and-so. So I could have as that, but I wanted to kind of respect his time. I didn't think this warranted his level of involvement, that it could certainly be handled at a lower level. It wasn't, I don't think, some ground shaking, like the world is going to fall apart issue. But I remember so specifically that day, I remember, I was sitting in my little cubicle. I came to the realization that I'm not going to be able to handle this on my own. I need some external inputs of how to do or solve this problem, whatever it was that I was having. And the office for the ADOs was just right across the hallway from me. And they had their own little office. And I think there were two of them in there, if I remember correctly. And at the time, it was an afternoon. I think it was one of those like weird chances that I was working a day shift, because we work shift work all the time. I was working a day shift, and it was in the afternoon. And of course, lots of things are going on all the time in an operational squadron, right? There's meetings that are happening all the time. There's upcoming exercises that are going on right now, operations, training, everything is just going on all day, every day. It's busy. It's just the nature of the military, and certainly in an operational flying squadron like ours was. And I walk into his office, and there's this major sitting there who I respected. He's a great guy, very likable, nice, easy to talk to. I didn't have much history with him as far as that goes. He was higher in rank than me, so he kind of had that implied respect and that implied authority. But this was kind of the first time I would say that we had interacted on a official, outside of a, hey, Kale, we've got this exercise coming up. We need to make sure we have crews available to support, blah, blah, blah. And I go, okay, sir, whatever you need, I'll help work that out to making sure people are available, right? So, but outside of like talking a little bit more and past that surface level, and I remember going to him, hey, Major so-and-so, I've got this problem, essentially is what I said. I said, hey, this is going on, right? A little short synopsis, as you should, instead of running in and saying, the sky is falling type thing. Like, hey, I've got this problem. This is how I've tried to solve it, or how I think and I'm essentially coming to a wall. Like, I don't know how to handle this. I don't know how to solve this problem. I don't have the experiences, the resources, whatever it is, right? When somebody comes to you with this type of thing, and the response wasn't, like asking more questions like, oh, okay, young officer, you're coming to me for help. Here's my opportunity to help you and teach you and mentor you, whatever the case may be. Hey, let me ask you some questions. Have you tried this? Have you thought about this? Have you done this? Oh, I had a similar experience, blah, 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 in this past and this is how it was handled, or this is going on. Or, hey, Susie over there, has dealt with this before. I think she would be a great resource for you to ask about. It was none of that. It was essentially, and I'm paraphrasing here because I didn't record the conversation. It was essentially by his attitude, his words, and his actions that he was too busy for me, and he had zero interest in helping me solve this issue. Whether he didn't think it was an important issue for his level, even though he was like my first level kind of interaction with higher leadership, or I maybe had misunderstood the importance of it. Certainly in my world, in my realm, it was important, right? It was important enough that I was providing time and energy to this and trying to figure it out, and I had failed and couldn't figure it out. So now I was seeking help, because I'm not one of those guys that just goes around and just haphazardly, takes other people's time. I think that's disrespectful, and I don't do that. I was one of those guys that, hey, if I'm coming to you for help, it legitimately means I need your help. And I don't know if he just failed to understand that or recognize that or wherever it was, but I remember so specifically, it was essentially, go figure it out for yourself, Kale, right? And sometimes as the leader, when somebody, whether it be a subordinate, a coworker, a teammate, whatever that is in your scenario that comes to you as the leader, as the experienced one for help, sometimes the answer is, hey man, you do need to figure that out yourself. But this was not the case of, I'm using this as a learning point, young officer, that you really need to kind of expand your thinking and figure this problem out for yourself. It's an exercise in problem solving. It was not that. It was, I'm too busy for you. I don't care about this issue. And I'm certainly not going to devote any of, as the senior leader, as any of my time to helping you solve it. Right. And that's what I walked out of that office away from. It was like a 2-minute thing. I was not officially dismissed, like you're dismissed, Captain Houser. It wasn't anything like that. It was just, I came quickly to the realization that this person had no interest in helping me. Here is my first level line of defense as far as when I ran into problems, somebody that I'm supposed to be able to count on to help me and theoretically is interested in helping the organization at large, right? And that was a complete bust in my eyes because it showed the culture, right? So this is something that when I had asked for help, and I didn't do it often, and that's something to be aware of, right? When somebody is not that kind of person, in your organization, that they're constantly coming to you for help, they're constantly coming to you for advice, they do take it upon themselves to figure it out. They're a little bit more of your high performers. And when they actually do, that should kind of send up the tinglies in the back of your head of, okay, Joe here wow, he's actually asking for help with something. Okay, this is legit. If Joe thinks this is a problem and Joe's not being able to figure out this problem, I should take the time, or minimum say, Joe, I'd love to help you. Yes. Is this an absolute emergency? No. Okay. Can we meet this afternoon so I can give you my full attention, right? Like everyone's got schedules and things going on. And that's a perfectly acceptable response because now Joe recognizes, okay, you've recognized that I brought you a problem. It's important, but I understand that you've got, whatever priority going on right now that can't be disturbed or moved. And we'll talk this afternoon. And Joe can say, absolutely, sir. Thank you for taking the time. I'll see you at 2:00, right? Whatever that is for you guys. But this really, by that not happening, by the opposite of that happening of essentially dismissal, it crushed. It absolutely crushed. Not personally, because I didn't take it personally that, oh, piss off, Kale, nothing like that. But it crushed my will to bring any other problems to my leadership, short of like massive emergencies, right? I wasn't at that point interested in hiding things. But it clearly told me, as part of my leadership journey, as part of my empowerment to handle things in my own flight and my own organization, that nobody else was interested in helping me. Now, to be fair, I did not go and ask the operations officer. I did not go and ask the commander, my direct supervisor, because by running into that frontline person, that ADO level, that what would be third level deep person, to me, that was indicative of the whole organization, whether it was true or false of that being so. By that person expressing that attitude, and because he had that position and had been given that position by the further up leadership, he represented the entire leadership team at that point. And his response to me was indicative, or so it translated in my brain of, okay, he, as supposedly the least busy, supposedly, the one with the least responsibility of these 3 levels of leadership above me, isn't interested in helping me. So certainly the operations officer isn't going to take the time or care enough, and definitely not the commander isn't going to take the time or care enough to help me with this issue. And that's how it translated in my brain. And I didn't ask for help. And honestly, I don't remember what I did. I don't remember if I just ignored the problem and hoped it went away. I don't remember if I came up with a solution or if I started asking around me. Like I honestly don't remember, because that was such a standout moment in my career. Because it really opened my eyes to upper leadership. You have this, everyone has this concept based on our own experiences, our own perceptions of what leaders do, right? They could be the kind of mythical creature that hangs out in their office, and you really don't know what they do. You understand that it's probably important, but you're not involved in that world or that decision making, and you rarely see them. They hardly ever come out of their office. You get an email from them all the time, but that's about it, right? There's this mythos that kind of goes with somebody that's in that power position, in that leadership position. And a lot of it translates back to selfishness. That's how I certainly interpreted it in this person that I tried to get help from. It was like they were essentially selfish. They didn't want to help me. They had other things going on, and I was not at all worth an intrusion into their time or energy or effort. And it became a real turning point for me in the military. So on one hand, right, horrible lesson. It could have gone the other way and been a really positive experience. But on the other hand, I was able to learn something from that. It became, like I said, a turning point in my journey of leadership, and it really changed my perception of senior leaders, and certainly senior leaders in the military. Because at this point, that had been most of my experience was that military culture and military style of leadership, which has its own drawbacks. But it really opened my eyes, and of course, at this point, I was already kind of thinking, like, is this for me? Do I fit into this type of culture? Do I fit into this type of structure? And I would argue, looking back now, it certainly was a big turning point in helping me make some decisions about my future and what I wanted to invest. And for the good part of it, it really opened my eyes of how do I not do that to somebody that comes to me. And that's really the takeaway from this whole discussion and this whole story and example is you as the leader, you will have people that come to you for help. It's kind of part of your job, right? You're the business owner. You're the experienced one. You're the one that has the answers, at least in their mind. And how you react to them when they ask for that help will make or break your organization. It will certainly make or break your esprit de corps, your culture in your organization. And I'm not saying, it's a one mistake kind of world, because that's rarely the case, although that happens occasionally. When somebody comes to you in an emergency and you completely dismiss them, you've basically lost them forever and they start looking for another job, right? That happens. And this is what Kale Houser Leadership really is all about fundamentally, is how do you build a culture to where, they can come, they can use their, official or unofficial chain of command to get help with problems, because that's what business is. It's just solving problems. If a client's got a problem, you've got a solution, you match those two together, right? But within that, things come up. Whether it be your sales department, whether it be your logistics guys, hey, FedEx is late, so this package isn't going to come out. All right, how do we solve this problem? All right, you take the company car, run down and drop it off. Now it has to go in overnight versus a 2-day or whatever, right? Business is just solving problems day to day. A lot of the same problems over and over with different clients, but it's still just solving problems. And if your leadership team, right, if you are big enough that you have an actual team that you would consider as part of the leadership echelon of your organization, they need to be on board with that. They need to be on board with your culture, assuming you're building this culture that is part of that, to be there for your lower levels, your entry level type of employees and your frontline workers, so that those guys don't lose faith in you, really, is what it comes down to. All right, so that's a long-winded way of when they come to ask for your help them. If you can't do it right then, refer them to somebody else. Like, I'm sorry, I've got this meeting that I can't be late for. I'll be back at 3:00. Can we meet then? Or, hey, Joe or Sarah, come over here. Alex right here has got this issue. Can you help him with that? I've got to jet out to, whatever the case may be, right? Not just my office hours are from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. to handle employee issues. Outside of that, you need to make an appointment for next week, right? And that's just pisses people off more than anything. So don't do that. Don't be that guy. So that's what Kale Houser Leadership does. We try to help businesses build their culture to where employees actually want to be there. And this is certainly a large part of that, the feeling that they can get the help they need when they need it, certainly with the big issues. Because that's showing an employee that actually cares about the organization enough to ask for help instead of just ignoring it, sweeping it under the rug, handling it themselves based on their own inexperience, that certainly, and the opportunity to do it really, really, really wrong. And be much worse than, taking the 15, 20, 30 minutes of your time to help them problem solve. All right, gang, thank you again for joining me. I appreciate it. I hope you're having a fantastic afternoon no matter where you're at in the world. Have a good day.